Hiya, today I'm going to be making some, I don't know, maybe a spoon or a fork for bushcrafting, and I was wanting to use my bearded axe which I made not that long ago. It's 4.5 pounds I believe, and it's been reprofiled and heat treated. I've done lots of work to it to get the edge looking very aggressive. As you can see, I've got a lot of a bite here, narrowness in the blade in the top, and for the beard I wanted to have a very precise grip for chopping, well, not chopping, but carving mostly. Not for splitting, as the girth here is just for the weight, for momentum. It's really more for shearing the wood off in sections rather than trying to hack it off. There's such a tremendous amount of weight for one hand that you don't really do much work, you just steer more or less where you want. Anyhow, onto the piece of, or the blank I guess we'll call it. I've kind of given myself a bit of a marking so I can know how far to go. I'm just whittling it down bit by bit until I get to the stage where I'll be using a knife to carve. But you try to reduce as much wood with the axe as possible, as it's a lot less work and time if you can steer the axe and do most of the work. So we'll have a go and see. I'm trying to whittle off sections with the grain, as working with the grain as opposed to against the grain, it's kind of a no-brainer. It makes it easier to go with the grain. So we'll see if we could shear off little bits at a time. I'm not really well used to speaking and working, as it's kind of distracting in a way, obviously. But you can see that the axe is able to take off quite a bit at a time. In fact, you want to kind of be careful you don't take off too much, as the guidelines that I have here are just a rough guide, more or less. It's not an exact science, you know, but you try for symmetry. If you reduce one bit on one side, you try and do the same on the other, and that way you're saving time. As I say, try and stick with the axe for as long as possible, and before you get to the knife work, because if you start using other tools, well, it's more to carry into the woods. And the idea is to do this as a bushcraft exercise. You want to be able to take as little as possible into the woods, because in all likelihood you could find yourself doing this under a tarp on a rainy day when you're out there. You don't know what nature's going to throw at you. So if you've got a few tasks that you've got under your belt that you could do when Mother Nature's throwing its curveballs at you, then it just makes you more flexible. And in the forest, time is not exactly a linear thing. You know, you don't have to get somewhere in a hurry. So you can enjoy what you're doing. Take your time, and there's no rush. The only rush, of course, is when you get the kettle on, making your next cuppy, which is always a very important part of it. So you see how I'm reducing on the one side. I've got to now reduce on that side, and that way I'm getting a bit of an arc or a handle for whatever this utensil might be. It's possible this will be probably a fork of sorts or something. Right, I'm going to draw the guideline for what I'm doing for the neck, for the crank. I'm wanting to try and aim for symmetry if I can. So as I've got lines going down one side, I'm not on the other, because I realize it's just kind of a rough guess. But I'm aiming for this to be the crank. This part here is all the crank. And this will be the section that will have either, well, like probably tapered in, something like that on either side, and then out like that as a handle. So right there is kind of a guideline, if you can see. So you basically just give yourself a rough estimate. As I say, it's not an exact science. So we're going to remove all this wood away on either side, and that can be done with the axe without too much trouble, because as I could show you, I still have 10 fingers just. Right, so let's see if we can reduce some of that down before we get to the knife. I take off a little on one side and then a little on the next side, on the other side, and that way it's more of a gradual progression, because it's not going to come out in one piece. So I'm prepared to, but one thing I should mention as safety, as using an axe of this size and this weight, well, any axe, you have to give it respect, as it's a tool that can do a lot of harm. But if you respect it and you don't start doing something it wasn't intended for, you should be okay. But there are certain rules of gravity. For example, if I lift it up way up high up here when it's not necessary, I'm putting in danger. I could easily hit my head or a tool, and in a workshop this small, you really don't have much room. So you have to be economical with what you do. So another point is that I won't try and reduce. You see how I've got a taper in here? I'm going to not, when I'm holding the piece of wood, I'm not going to go higher than halfway, or rather maybe even a third of this piece of wood. I'm not going to raise my axe and start chopping higher than it, as it's just asking for danger, because obviously I can't maneuver the piece of wood that well. So I start from, say, about 2/3 to a third down and head down and take off this section. When I'm wanting to do up here, I'll simply flip it round and do the same idea going down. But as I was saying originally, is you're taking off small increments at a time. You're not going to be rushing around trying to swing this axe everywhere. It's just far too dangerous. And this axe is extremely sharp. In fact, you probably wouldn't notice if you did do serious harm. You probably wouldn't realize it until it was too late. As in, oh, there's my finger. So just to keep it straight, you just head from maybe a third or so, or halfway down, and then you flip it round and then work on the other side. So that's what I'll do. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here properly, but I'm just taking off small increments at a time. And I'm trying to work with the grain of wood, which is telling me that it's going to come off fairly cleanly. There we go. Starting to get there. See, as I'm shaping it, I'm getting somewhere. So, as my video is already probably too long, I'll let you go. But as far as working with an axe, You really have to respect it and try, if you can, to not swing the thing, but you're steering it. And you're wanting to take off increments of wood, not massive amounts, just smaller amounts and on a gradual basis. And as an axe of this nature is actually intended for, as I made it deliberately for, shearing the wood, as in slicing the wood off, rather than hacking it or chopping it. Thank you.